Hey everyone! The weather became reasonable for a couple days before ramping back up to the same temperatures as last week. And that's how it goes here. Whenever it rains, it sort of resets the skyrocketing temperatures. Last time, we got to see Naruto return at long last. He had a shocking reunion with his patrolling friends, and a more than awkward conversation with his dad, where neither seemed to reconcile not seeing each other for years. Hinata returned to Konoha, and Sasuke made an unbelievable offer. Let's touch on that for just a second. In canon, the Uchiha are said to be capable of a love far more powerful than anyone else. However, we only ever see the negative side of that. Sasuke wasn't acting on a whim here. He was acting out of an extreme reaction of empathy. It wasn't an out-of-hand offer either. I want the Uchiha to commit to decisions that are directed by their emotions. His empathy for her overrode the disdain Uchiha have for the Hyuga. Which basically means that in this case, his positive feelings of love overwhelmed his negative feelings of hate. Basically, the Uchiha are impulsive on the stronger feelings they have, but they're not reckless. Had Sasuke not been offered eyes by Tsunade earlier, he wouldn't have made that offer. And the way I've constructed the time skip memories so far, I've basically picked up from the moment each character went missing, and then explained the vagaries of where they headed immediately afterward. This next set of time skip memories will cover a far longer set of time to generalize for everyone what each character was doing. In other words, we won't necessarily see specific techniques picked up on, but rather certain lessons each learn along the way, or certain other characters that they meet. In this way, I hope that nothing feels too rushed, but I've never wanted this time skip arc to last for a very long time, so this is sort of my answer to prevent that from happening. In other news, I'm going to do something rather experimental for this next set of episodes. I'm very curious as to whether it'll work, but it's not the kind of thing that I can stop doing halfway through. I either have to full commit to doing it, or not try at all. But I think it'll be very fun to do, so I'm trying it. An explanation is in order. This is the second half of my time skip arc, but it's also a little arc in itself as well. From today's episode straight through to an episode roughly 12 away from now, there are some specific parameters in place. These next 12 episodes take place in the same 6 days. Even though they'll be obviously weeks apart in release order, in universe, only 6 days will have passed. This is obviously for narrative reasons that I won't get into now. But for further clarification, and for the sake of this arc, every episode will be titled to include a day between 1 and 6. The intent is to keep the timeline clear for everyone trying to piece together and know which day that event happened on. This might seem a little convoluted now, but I think at the end of it all now, I can dedicate just as much time to the time skip as I will to present events. And with all of that out of the way, let's jump right in. Immediately following the events of last episode, Neji was standing in the doorframe of Hinata's room when Sasuke blurted out his outlandish offer. Neji's father turned to Sasuke instantly, his eyes wide. His mouth hung open, and he mouthed several lost words of shock before shaking his head and stepping closer to Sasuke. Sasuke shook his head in return and loudly insisted that this was within his power to help, so he would. Now, more than ever, as everyone recuperates from the war, they should be more united than ever for a stronger return. If giving up just one eye would help unite the houses of Hyuga and Uchiha, Sasuke considered it a small sacrifice. He's a talented ninja. He doesn't need a Sharingan to continue performing above average. Walking into the room himself, Neji felt shock and anger towards Sasuke for making the offer. He was angry that he himself didn't make an offer first. Surely the eye of one of the Hyuga's most promising going to its heir would be the ultimate gesture of what was supposed to be her ward in Konoha. Pushing Sasuke, Neji expressed this annoyance, but it didn't go far because he wasn't about to articulate his jealousy at Sasuke's selfless offer. "I'm getting a new eye anyway, so I might as well give her mine," Neji insisted to his father, remarking this way he could accept the previously offered eye and still only have one to atone for his previous inability. Sighing at the suggestion, Hisashi tells them that he needs to consult Lord Hokage first anyway. "Don't I get a say in this?" Hinata asks from the bed, annoyed that they spoke to each other as if she wasn't even there. "What if I don't want to accept the offer?" "Nonsense! The heir of leadership for the Hyuga will not grow up blind." Hisashi rejects her premise. That the house of the all-seeing Byakugan is led by who cannot see at all is a foolish destruction of our ideals. But enough of this suggestion. The Uchiha boy seems to be the only good one from his clan. We cannot snub the offer, Hisashi continues angrily. "What offer?" Lady Tsunade asks, her turn to be standing at the entrance to the room, attracted by their rising voices. After a short explanation, Tsunade regards Sasuke carefully. "You're willing to give up on your family's Kekkei Genkai?" "It's a powerful tool," Sasuke nods. "But I can't just do nothing about her predicament when I know I can do this." "You might be the de facto head of your clan at this point, but giving up your only Sharingan is going to be controversial," Tsunade tells him, agreeing with Hisashi that they need to speak with Minato before anything else. In the days that followed, Neji found himself further and further removed from the situation. He thought his involvement was important, but clearly the adults of the village were not so keen on it. However, through his separation, he was at least able to convince his dad to have his Byakugan transferred to Hinata. He reasoned that perhaps his eye was more powerful arrived before Neji found himself in the hospital to undergo a multi-stage eye transplant. Hinata was in the operating room at the moment, and Neji was still unsure as to whether Sasuke's offer had even been accepted. There were certainly several heated arguments that echoed throughout the Hyuga compound, as his father and Minato struggled to find even footing. From the little that he could pick up on during these loud matches, it seemed that Minato was staunchly against Sasuke donating his eye. However, Neji's dad was more and more in favor of the offer, becoming convinced that it could, at long last, settle the rift between houses. He wondered just how much arguing had to happen before they settled on an agreement of any kind. And whatever that agreement was, what was the cost that followed? Not just that, but Neji wasn't Naruto and Sasuke. He was informed that it was to help destroy the gap of hatred, and instead build the bridge of peace between two powerful clans. Wouldn't Sasuke's eye donation further that cause? Ultimately, Neji agreed with the Hokage though. On one hand, it could bolster relations. On the other, Hinata might be volunteering herself into becoming a pariah. What if the rest of the clan rejected the offer, but the surgery was done anyway? Maybe the two houses were so on edge with each other because of reasons beyond the petty. Maybe their blood was incompatible, and Hinata's body would just outright reject the Sharingan. Time that had passed, they were still treating him like a hapless child, ignorant and dumb to the world's problems. However, by the standards of the village, Neji was now old enough to make his own decisions. Technically, he only consulted his father out of respect and tradition. Almost as answer to his troubled thoughts, several branch family members were at the entrance to the hospital, barred entry by Shizune as they attempted to protest the surgery. This at least confirmed one thing. Sasuke's offer had been accepted. Why else would they be here now? Exiting the surgery room, Hisashi regards the Hokage quietly before turning his attention to Neji. "I've been thinking about this process," he tells Neji. and I've changed my mind. You're going to keep your eye. That seal that was on your eye when you returned was both strong and mysterious. Even that Uzumaki escort that was sent here to assist with removing it was stumped by its complexity. I cannot take the risk of taking that eye out and implanting it into the heir of the clan, should there be any other traps we don't know about. If a seal stumps an Uzumaki, that's cause for concern. She's the heir, and you're the face of the new generation, so you might as well keep your powerful eye. But, father, Neji argues, speechless at the last-minute changed decision. You'd rather she receive an eye from an Uchiha before her own flesh and blood? She will still receive a second eye from another in our family, but it won't be from you. You can refuse a second eye all you want, but I will not remove that one eye that might have complex jutsu surrounding it. Especially when you won't share details about where that seal came from. Neji couldn't fight with his father in front of the Hokage, and so was forced to accept this sudden decision. Even to his father, he could not share the information about the seal that had kept his Byakugan locked away. That carried with it knowledge so dangerous that it could upend their entire clan. A couple weeks passed of Hinata and Sasuke both recovering from their respective surgeries. Sasuke was one of few left in his clan, but Lady Tsunade had the wherewithal to salvage the eyes of the turncoat Uchiha who fell against the Hokage. So Sasuke woke up with 2 Sharingan-capable eyes, and Hinata woke up with 1 Byakugan and 1 Sharingan-capable eye, and was under close watch from everyone in the village for how her body would take the eye. Day 2. Finally released to walk around town on her own, Hinata is begrudgingly escorted around by Neji. Her frustration is clear from a mile away, and he knows the trials and tribulations she faced while away from the village probably made her pretty independent. But inwardly, Neji followed her for selfish reasons. Since Sasuke's offer, he'd grown suspicious of a growing connection between he and Hinata, and wanted to prevent that wherever possible. Due to the nature of the Byakugan, she could not easily elude him, but used crowds when she could to at least create distance. But every time she did this, Neji became more concerned that Sasuke was hiding nearby to snatch her away. He understood the clear benefit of the stronger relations between Hyuga and Uchiha, but he didn't want that building relation to be between Hinata and Sasuke. And while she gave no indication that this was at all happening, he still couldn't shake the suspicion. But watching Hinata as she walked around was a wonder in itself. She seemed enamored with simple things, like ants walking around their anthill, and spending half an hour closely observing the layered petals of a flower. She was like a child who'd spent all her life indoors, but it was obvious that this was a newfound love of her returned sight. There weren't many in the world that could have reclaimed their sight like she had. Since Hizashi wanted her to take it easy for a while, Hinata wasn't permitted to do any training or even D-rank missions. As such, her eye from Sasuke had remained inert. However, the donated Byakugan in her other eye began working immediately. This gave Neji hope that the other wouldn't become a Sharingan. For it to be a charitable gesture and not muddy the Hyuga lineage with Uchiha power was an outcome that Neji considered most favorable. Worst case scenario, he thought the Sharingan would somehow corrupt the Byakugan eye. But it was good news all around so far. Walking through the woods, Hinata kept stopping to look at the ridges of a tree bark, or to marvel at the gills of mushrooms. A walk that would normally take 10 minutes had turned into hours, as Hinata stopped at every mundane object to gaze at excitedly. Through the trees, Neji heard a door shut and realized how close the two of them were to the Hokage's house. He saw no harm at all in her seeing Naruto, and began the painstaking process of guiding her in that direction. Despite his attempts to focus her on the walk, Hinata was clearly intent on her own pace. But eventually, regardless of the struggle, Neji managed to bring her close to Naruto's house. It was only a second after knocking at the door before Minato answered, surprised at their faces. When they asked to see Naruto, he told them that he had been out all day. In fact, Naruto didn't really spend any time at home these days, but who could blame him after all his time away? Nodding along with the Hokage, Neji apologized for bothering him, but to his surprise, he and Hinata were invited inside for a drink. "I was looking forward to seeing you anyway, to check on your recovery, Lady Hinata," Minato explained as he passed them cups of tea. "I'm doing well, though I never realized how colorful and detailed the world was," Hinata answered with a smile. "The things you take for granted, right?" Smiling back at her, Minato's eyes narrowed, clearly at her inert Sharingan eye. "I expected to sense residual Uchiha chakra in that eye, but yours has totally enveloped it. I hope that means that your body will not reject it. I've been keeping a keen eye on her progress for any discrepancies as well, Lord Hokage," Neji explained, nodding in reassurance. "Don't get me wrong, I don't wish any ill will on you, Hinata," Minato said slowly after some thought. "But Sasuke's from one of the fiercest families this village has ever known. For chakra like that to enter into such a loving, peaceful person as your own is concerning." "Yes!" Neji quickly answered before Hinata could. It was almost as if the Hokage knew what Neji was thinking, and knew how to articulate it perfectly. "I don't think Sasuke is all that fierce," Hinata answered with a chuckle. "He's never even been rude to me." "Nevertheless, I implore you to take caution," Minato told her. "If that eye feels even a little bit weird, we'll have to remove it right away for your sake." Yes, Lord Hokage," Hinata agreed, though she could not hide the doubt in her voice. After their short visit, they got up to leave when Minato asked for Neji's ear for a touch longer. Though he would normally insist on staying by Hinata's side, Neji was rarely personally called upon for anything by the Hokage. It was an opportunity he could not ignore. Hinata told him she would wait outside while he and Minato spoke. "Listen, Neji," Minato muttered, even after Hinata went outside and his tone was darker. "I might have to rely on you for the intimate knowledge that she won't share. But it's a sneaky thing to do, reporting on her behind her back," Minato acknowledges. "I wouldn't ask this if it didn't mean anything other than her absolute protection." "Lord Hokage, you're right. That is deceptive," Neji agrees, nodding to the Hokage. "But I want nothing else but for her protection. My family has always taught that Hokage comes first. I will not fail you on this task," Neji promises seriously. Going to the front door, both realize that Hinata has gone, and Neji looks up the street, his Byakugan activating as his head turns. She's nowhere in sight. But reduced to a single Byakugan, Neji's range is limited now. "Lord Hokage, can you sense where she is?" Neji asks, unsure of where she would want to be right now. "No, I can't sense her anywhere," Minato admits. "She must have taken off at top speed. Don't worry, you'll find her." Neji walked for a month before he reached the land of waterfalls. He was careful to avoid any population, large or small, in his travels. With his Byakugan still sealed away, he couldn't take any chances with a surprise combat with the powers that be. He remembered the incident of the border dispute and how the Land of Grass had been infested with rock ninja, and wondered if that was still the case, and worse yet, if they had poured into the neighboring lands of waterfalls and rain. Though he traveled cautiously, he didn't need to. Clearly this war between the leaf and rock had all but dissipated. The forest was quiet. Having camped in the open without a fire for weeks and weeks, Neji found a great fortune when he came across an apparently abandoned cabin in the middle of the thick forest. It was dusty inside, and cobwebs spanned the chairs and tables within. Everything was cold, and there was no food left in any shelf. There was one door that obviously led to a bedroom, but Neji was doubtful that there was anything of benefit in there if the rest of the shack was so bare. As rushed as he felt to get home, Neji also felt a level of relief to have proper shelter. When he laid down on the floor to rest, he would sleep for a whole day, and his eyes would snap open the moment he woke. It was not like him to just so fully drop his guard, but equally, he must have been even more exhausted than he thought. But still, he remained alone in the abandoned shack, and his stresses diminished again. Promising himself he would just take a couple days here to rest and recover, Neji did some rudimentary foraging to keep himself fed. But he avoided anything that required cooking, as he didn't want a fire to attract attention. However, one morning, he wakes to an older man sitting at the table. During Neji's sleep, the man had not only entered the shack undetected, but cleaned all the cobwebs out and restored the shack completely silently. Despite this, Neji launched to his feet, irked that the man sat in the way of Neji's only exit from the little house. Picking through his teeth with a toothpick, the man grins and keeps his eyes on the bread on the table in front of him. "At least someone was making use of my home while I was away," the man acknowledges kindly. "All these wars keep pulling me out of retirement." Neji couldn't get a peg on the man, whether he was lulling Neji into a false sense of security, or if he was truly as nice as his tone reflected. "You should pocket that headband of yours," the man offered. "I've never held anything against the Leaf, but you travel safer if you're anonymous." "You keep to your own business, old man," Neji answered, paranoid. "It's obvious that you're a Hyuga too. Even without that Byakugan of yours activated, your eyes are unique." "Who are you?" Neji asks, concerned about just how much the man knew about him. "Just an old ninja that was unlucky enough to not die in battle," the man tells him finally, turning to face him. "For whom do you fight?" Neji asks. "I just told you to hide your headband, and you're wondering where I'm from?" The man chuckles at the suggestion. "You've clearly never traveled alone. I have fought in the Second War for decades. My home village gave me ribbons and medals and trophies for my work, and yet here I am, a forgotten nobody in the middle of nowhere." "You're not old enough to be retired," Neji observes. The man has jet black hair, and long scars running around his arms and on his face, but aside from some smile lines and wrinkles around his eyes, he doesn't scream of an ancient veteran. His eyes are off color too, a piercing green, not a color Neji was used to seeing. "When you're as accomplished as myself, you choose when you retire," the man smiles, raising an eyebrow at Neji. "Are you sizing me up?" "I'm not looking to fight," Neji tells him honestly. "I would hope not," the man nods, pointing at Neji's eye. "A Hyuga must be pretty useless without their Byakugan." "I would know. My eyes are Byakugan as well. But my body rejected them. It changed their hue, and though they continue to function like any normal eye would, the Byakugan's power is all but lost." Gritting his teeth, Neji is realizing the man is clearly knowledgeable on seals, as well as his own clan. Did he hunt and kill a Hyuga to get those eyes, or were they gifts from allies? He's either a former Leaf Ninja, or he's been around the block enough times to just know these things. "You can't be older than 12. Why is the Leaf still conscripting their children? So much for being the more refined nation," the man complains, his raised eyebrow narrowing into a frown. "I wish I had spent more of my youth taking it easy and having fun. Finding love, or at least playing with the idea of it. Take things less seriously. Instead, I'm past my prime, with nothing but horrors in my past." What a time to be alive, he concludes sarcastically, reflecting on himself just in looking at Neji. You may be an old hero of a past time, but will you let me leave? Neji asks carefully because, as much as he doesn't want to fight, he will if he must. I was never holding you here, the man shrugs, pushing his chair in to make space. Though if you want that seal dealt with, I can probably undo it, should you stick around. And so the old hero inspected and identified the sloppiness of the seal that had been placed on Neji's eye. He clarifies that while he can fix it, maybe it's better for that adversity only makes you stronger. Blind those with sight, deafen those who can hear, remove the ability to smell. All of these tactics make a ninja better with ability. After all, the old hero explains that Neji was no happy-go-lucky kid. Promising to remove the seal regardless, the old hero asks Neji if he's willing to take on this training. Still burdened with the shame of losing the one eye and abandoning Sasuke to his fate, Neji nods. But not for long. I have places to be. And so, Neji spent every waking moment training under the old hero's tutelage. Though he repeatedly asked the old man why he wanted to train Neji, he never got any answers, just dodges and avoidance. One thing the old hero kept trying to instill into Neji was his radically different dogma. Where Neji was racked with duty and this insurmountable shame for failing his duty of protecting Hinata or protecting the Byakugan, the old hero met that with cold determination. The old hero held no allegiance to anyone anymore. He fought for those he agreed with, rather than those who looked the same as him, or who wore the same clothes. And it wasn't ever personal. Even at his age, he was hard-pressed to find someone who could match him for skill. Neji learned that the man had left his shack for 6 years before returning just now. No matter how long he left it for, the shack always seemed to remain standing for his return, though he never found someone sleeping in it like Neji had been. Just as the old hero had promised, he placed a seal on Neji's ears that cut off all sound and challenged him to countless sparring matches. The man was ruthless and didn't let up even a little bit for Neji's benefit. But Neji did not complain, seeing these punishing duels as a way to atone for his screw-ups. Though the old hero was not a Hyuga himself, he had profound knowledge on most jutsu. He knew his way around sealing jutsu, had access to 3 different chakra natures, and seemed equally imposing with all 3 branches of taijutsu, ninjutsu, and genjutsu. He consistently forced Neji to get creative with his combat, resorting to genjutsu that he wasn't very good at, or using ninjutsu with barely any time to spare. But regardless of the variety of resistances, the old man continually and repeatedly beat Neji up. Finally, after days of training, Neji finally blocked his first blow. Panting, Neji looked down at the ground as the old man's hands settled on his ears and relinquished the seal on them. There are so many sound cues in fighting, the old hero told him. And if you can learn to fight regardless of those, you can learn how to fight blind as well. Again, he invited, kicking Neji's ankles and causing him to fall to the ground. The old hero's eyes, sharp and piercing, fixed unwaveringly on Neji. There was no hint of leniency in his gaze, only the expectation of absolute dedication and resolve. Neji, sweat soaking his clothes, clenched his fists in readiness, steeling himself for what was to come. Taking a deep breath to center himself, Neji launched forth with a swift kick, aiming for the old hero's midsection. Good! Strike at the largest part of your target if they're far beyond you, the old hero complimented even as he met Neji's shin with a rock-hard fist to deflect it. The impact sent a jolt through Neji's leg, but he suppressed any outward sign of discomfort. Digging his toes into the ground, he kicked up a spray of dirt before engaging in hand-to-hand combat, only for every strike to be met by precise blocks or swift dodges. The old hero moved with a fluidity that Neji wouldn't have expected for his size and age. The old hero's movements were economical, yet devastatingly effective. As the hours passed and hunger continually gnawed at Neji, the old hero showed no signs of slowing. "Don't be so predictable," the old man remarked coolly after another failed attempt by Neji to breach his defenses. "You telegraph your moves. Do it any more and I will exploit that weakness. Gentle Fist is precise and powerful upon success, but it's slow, choreographed, and requires the Byakugan. Remove its weaknesses. Evolve it." Neji's breath came in ragged gasps at the end of each training session. His limbs felt like lead weights, each movement a struggle against the invisible currents of fatigue that threatened to pull him down. Every muscle in Neji's body screamed in protest, a chorus of soreness and exhaustion that echoed with every step he took toward the old man's shack. The throbbing aches in his joints matched the rhythms of his heartbeat, a relentless reminder of the physical toll exacted by the grueling training sessions. And so days turned to weeks, and then to months, as Neji grew more and more attached to the relentless training. One evening, as snow began to fall outside, Neji sat across from the old hero as they both enjoyed their fresh catch from a nearby bird from entering the old hero's bedroom. But he was so tired at the end of each day that he could have slept anywhere comfortably, so Neji didn't complain. However, he did have one nagging question that was only growing more and more troubling. "Why did you decide to spend so much time training me? You don't even know me," Neji asked after a swell of silence. The old hero regarded his fish quietly as he separated the stray bones from the meat. "Time is nothing," he said at last as he finished cleaning any remaining flesh from the fish. "Even if I spent 10 years with you out here, it's nothing. Though I suppose that's not a very satisfying answer," the old hero acknowledged, grimacing that he had nothing left to eat. "I know only one thing in this world. I fight. That's all I've ever done. Do I wish that I had led a different life? Maybe. But I haven't. I've led this life. Might as well lean into it. When my time does come at last, it would perhaps put my heart at ease to know that I've left a legacy behind. Nothing's random, though. You found your way to my shack, where I've never seen anyone find their way here. Call it a chance encounter. Call it fate. Maybe I'm training you to exceed me so I can finally get that combat cold it got or how much snow covered the ground. They trained through it all, and Neji learned that taijutsu could be far deadlier if your fists were numb to pain. When spring came and the snowy ground turned to slippery mud, they continued onwards, and Neji learned how his environment could enhance ninjutsu. In the sweltering heat of summer, Neji also learned how the elements can influence genjutsu. The old hero never seemed to bore of these lessons, but perhaps it was because he never lost the sparring matches. Neji found himself learning more and more about environmental combat and how, even without the Byakugan's assistance, he could remain fully cognizant of his surroundings for any manner of jutsu he intended on using. Through the old hero, Neji was able to perfect his gentle fist to a new level that none of his Hyuga benefactors seemed intent on developing. It would be 2 years of this constant daily training before the old hero laid down hands on Neji and released the seal on his eye, unlocking the Byakugan at long last. And it was after a devastating day of training. As happy as Neji was for the favor, he was too tired to embrace its power, and collapsed onto the floor, as was his custom by this point. When he awoke the next day, the old hero wasn't waiting for him. Just as before, when Neji originally found this shack, everything had been stripped from it, and nothing remained. The only constant was that the old hero's bedroom door remained shut. Neji had an inkling that the man had left once more for lands unknown, and that perhaps it was time for him to move on as well. Placing a hand on the doorknob of the bedroom, Neji wondered why he was barred from seeing within. But he lifted his hand away and decided that it would be an absolute mark of disrespect to disobey the old hero just because he wasn't present. Leaving a note just in case the old hero was going to return soon, Neji decided to move on and continue towards Konoha. Neji waited until he had passed beyond the forest to activate his Byakugan after 3 long years without it. But he had to deactivate it quickly as the information overload was far more than he was expecting. Deciding to ease back into it, Neji took his time as he crossed the border into the Land of Fire and sought to retrain his eye. One morning, waking beside a river when Neji had grown very much accustomed to eating fish, he did a morning exercise before activating his Byakugan. As before, it was scary to see so much all at once, despite how often he used to do this. Colors seemed sharper, details more pronounced, and the trees nearby turned to translucent veils. Trying to focus on the vast distance to test the range of his eye, Neji paused and noticed an odd movement. A faint, ethereal presence hovered in the distance. The amorphous entity shimmered with a faint bluish hue as it drifted serenely above the forest below it. From his angle and distance, its edges were blurred and indistinct. Were it stray chakra, it would have dissipated in the time Neji had to observe it, but it remained through it all. Neji thought that maybe it was a marker set by someone to remember a location. Deactivating his Byakugan, he walked in its general direction, and when he came to where he thought it had been, he reactivated his Byakugan. It was still there, 30 meters above his head, just as indiscernible as before. Turning his Byakugan on and off repeatedly, Neji made sure to triple-check whether it was visible to normal sight. It was not. The Sharingan would be unable to see this, which told Neji that it was a signal that had been left by a Hyuga. It was so small that Neji marked it up to sheer luck that he had saw it. Either there was a strange object suspended in the air above him, or there was something nearby that it was calling attention to. Sitting below the blob of chakra, Neji contemplated what it could mean. He was still a couple weeks' walk from Konoha, so it was hardly set up by a local. With his Byakugan, Neji looked around as best as he could at the surrounding area to see if perhaps there was a hidden grave nearby, or maybe weapons or treasure. But all seemed rather uninteresting and bland. Beside him was one of the many forests of the Land of Fire, and as he peered into it with a Byakugan, he made sure to focus on the distance, to penetrate as many trees as he could. After all his time with the old hero, he did not fear a trap and progressed into the forest, making sure to keep that first chakra signal in sight. Eventually, Neji was able to confirm his suspicions. There was a second marker much further into the forest. It was just as high as the first one, and so far away that Neji actually had to walk beyond the range of the first one. He had momentarily given up and took a couple courtesy minutes to wander further in before he saw it. And so he repeated this time and time again, found further markers, all spaced insanely far apart. Night fell before he reached the end of the trail, and when Neji woke up the next day, expecting the markers to have vanished, they still very much remained. And it would be weeks before Neji finally reached the end point. After dedicating all of his focus and attention to tracking down each individual marker in a slow and methodical scan. But the last marker was no different than the first, and Neji even wandered beyond it in several directions before deciding that it must have been the last one. Setting up camp beneath it, Neji wondered what kind of vague and obscene prank someone would play to lead him so far astray from his journey back to Konoha. Because this last marker was not near anything. It simply floated above more forest. There was nothing of note that Neji could find. It was a dead end. Only a couple days of exhaustive investigation would pass before Neji decided to plant himself directly beneath the marker. He heard a sudden twang, and the ground fell out from under him. There was a trap. Whatever the rock below was made of, his Byakugan could not penetrate beyond it, so he could not see what he was falling into. He could hear rushing water nearby, and could at least see that with his Byakugan. He was in a rather small cavern. The fall had been nearly 60 feet, but he landed uninjured thanks to the soft earth that had fallen with him. When he tried to scale the walls of the cavern, he found that they had some sort of chakra resilience, and he could not walk up them. Forced to get creative, Neji used earth jutsu to make the earth that had fallen down with him into stairs that led up to the surface. It would get the job done to get him out, but while he was down here, he thought maybe this was where the chakra marker was signaling to go. The underground river here was at least 10 feet deep, 20 feet wide, and rushed by fast. He knew that if he slipped in, not only would it be nearly impossible to get out because of this smooth chakra-resilient stone, but it could very well carry him through its underground passages, and he might even drown from the event. Keeping well away from the river's edge, Neji scoured the limited floor of the cavern for any clue as to why it was so important for him to follow this wild goose chase. Other than the odd nature of the stone itself, there wasn't anything of note. He expected to at least see carvings on the wall by some long-past humans or something. There was another bit of cavern floor across the rushing river that still needed exploring. Though Neji was confident in his own footing, the mere fact of the risk in falling in stayed him for a moment. Laughing at his hesitation, Neji braced himself and leapt across the river. He immediately noticed the difference in the cavern floor here. There was a square block of rock that had obviously been carved out. From the touch of his hands, it was smooth and unremarkable outside of its clearly man-made shape. It wasn't in direct sunlight over here, so he activated his Byakugan to permeate the darkness and discern greater detail. As he did so, the block shimmered with an unexpected intensity. Lines of energy pulsed beneath the surface, forming a delicate web of inscriptions that danced in response to his heightened gaze. It was an old language, but similar enough to his own that Neji was able to discern meaning as he fell to his knees and focused on what the words said. These weren't a historical document, so much as a journal kept by someone who clearly knew how the Byakugan worked. These are the words of Hito, of the Hyuga clan. Verily, the clan hath been rent asunder. Aside from myself, only 2 members do remain. The rest hath slain each other or themselves. This madness reeketh, devouring even the most noble amongst us. I do fear that none shall ever be capable of containing this curse. Into hiding have I been forced. Should the other clans, especially the Uchiha, learn of this curse, they shall seek it out for themselves. And even unto the Uchiha, our dire foe, would I not wish to bestow this anathema. Our clan shall tear itself apart without the Uchiha lifting a single finger. And it is by reason of these dreaded Uchiha that the Hyuga must endure this scourge. We ken well our allies and our foes. It doth behoove us to keep this distinction clear. To any who doth discover this missive, dread this plague that may befall thee, and keep it a secret from any Hyuga who still doth survive. Slay thine enemies. We are guardians solely for our allies. Confuse not the two. Curling a lip in confusion at the message, Neji wondered what the curse was that befell his clan in the past. Clearly they defeated it though, since the clan was as strong as ever. Straightening, Neji looked away from the tablet, but his Byakugan remained entirely focused on it. No longer did he have control to look in any direction with it. Its sole power was locked onto the tablet. Control of his own eyes had been taken from him. Panicking, Neji leapt blindly across the river and felt around for the earthen spire he had previously erected. No matter how he moved his head, his entire focus from his Byakugan remained upon the tablet. He couldn't even deactivate his power. Fear gripped Neji's heart as he realized the danger of his predicament. Every attempt to deactivate the Byakugan proved futile, as the strange trap felt like it was tightening its grip on him with every passing moment. Panic threatened to overwhelm him as he desperately sought a way to escape the tablet's trap. Climbing blindly out of the cavern, Neji found that the tablet vanished at last from view as the strange rock in the cavern blocked it out, but his eyes still remained locked on where the tablet was. He couldn't even deactivate his Byakugan to sleep. Closing his eyes, all he continued to see was the ground above, blocking his view of the tablet. As the panic finally took full control of his actions, Neji shot to his feet and fled into the forest. Even though he faced away from the tablet as he ran, all he could see was the ground still, and continually ran into trees and tripped over roots. Jarring himself square against one large tree, Neji stopped for a moment and attempted to gather his thoughts. He knew he was still within his Byakugan's range of the tablet. If it was going to keep his eyes locked in, he needed to at least take notes or at least memorize what the tablet said. Returning to the hole in the ground, Neji descended once more into the chamber to regain a clear look at the tablet and committed its words to memory. After this, he methodically walked through the forest away from the tablet until he outranged it with his Byakugan. At this point, his Byakugan immediately deactivated, and control of his vision was returned to him. Sighing with relief, Neji slumped to the ground with a cold sweat, fearful of what may have happened to him had the effects not ended. Knowing now that it was possible to dispel, Neji returned to his camp and studied the words carefully. The older languages sometimes spoke in riddles, or even backwards, and he wondered if there was any important information contained within. It was certainly protected well enough. After a couple days of working up the courage to look at the tablet again, Neji discovered another problem. His Byakugan was sealed again. He just can't catch a break. Given that the contents of the message detailed a near-extinction event for the Hyuga, and Neji still had no knowledge of such an event, he figured the tablet had been sitting there untouched for centuries. Descending into the cavern once more to look for any further clues, Neji felt the earthen spire begin to crumble. Perhaps it was due to being in this chakra-resilient cavern, the soil could no longer support itself and fell apart. Except this time, the vast majority fell into the rushing river and was swept away. And now Neji was trapped in the cavern, its ceiling too high to leap out of. He knew there'd be air pockets along the way, but the river route was so incredibly dangerous, since he didn't know where it ultimately led. Recalling the old hero, Neji laughed despite himself. The old man would have jumped in without hesitation. Taking a deep breath, Neji took the plunge. Neji searched all across the village, but wherever Hinata had gone, she'd figured out how to completely elude him. It was twilight now, as the sun had fully descended, and the sky turned to an obscure blue formed of dying light. Any villagers left in the streets were either going to local taverns with friends, or heading home for the night. Without his Byakugan, Neji hated this time of night, since everything appeared blurry and nebulous. But he decided to head home all the same. Hinata wasn't so irresponsible to not return home at a decent time. For all Neji knew, she'd been there for hours and he was fruitlessly searching all around town. Walking up the main street of Konoha, Neji crossed many intersections, and it was here where there were many gatherings of people who were preparing for a night out of fun and laughs. But the closer he got to the junction that led to the Hyuga mansion, the less people there were on the streets. Naturally, the closer to the Hokage building you got, the more professional buildings were. Only further out were there establishments that stayed open all night. It was past his own self-regulated curfew, too. The old hero made it clear that staying out until all hours of the night had passed weakened the mind. Surely the booze they drank in the taverns also weakened the mind, Neji mused while he walked. Blasting around an upcoming corner, Neji spots Kiba with Akamaru close behind, as the two turn toward him with mad panic. Stopping, Neji holds out a hand for Kiba to stop, but the latter nearly crashes into him anyway, clutching Neji by his robes and pulling him close. Neji frowns at Kiba's insane grip strength as Akamaru whines worriedly beside. "Neji!" Kiba shouted, inches from his face. "The Hokage's in danger!" "What are you talking about?" Neji asks, his Byakugan activating as he looks around for any eavesdroppers. Kiba, with his nose, should have been able to elude anyone tracking him, though. "I overheard some people talking." "A plot," Kiba muttered in disbelief. "Leaf Shinobi planning a coup." "Let's go tell the Hokage." "No! If he finds out, we could have a civil war." And that's the end of today's episode. I believe this might end up being my longest yet. This arc is going to be so much fun to unravel. Apologies ahead of time to the non-native English speakers listening. I use Old English as well as a few large words. I know here, so I just had to add it in. Also, boy, what an episode! Entirely Neji focused. I will tell you that the old hero is a canonical character with slight variations to his lore. Very slight. I think I left enough information that it could be reasonably solved by some of my more intrepid viewers. Then again, maybe it's so obvious that this one won't be a mystery at all. And then we have what Neji found, an ancient artifact from a forgotten time. Those of you who have been waiting for the payoff of one of my earliest story changes, this was a big piece of that. But discerning that puzzle, I'll leave up to you for now. Again, I tried to leave it vague, but with just enough information that someone could reasonably figure it out. This is sort of a trial and error for me as well, to see if I can set up puzzles and mysteries that are easy, medium, or hard to solve. The Song of Ice and Fire has so many little clues to it that it took many books for me to break it down and make an educated guess. And I don't mean the Song of Ice and Fire the series, I mean the actual riddle within the series. I don't intend for any of my puzzles to be that in-depth, but I certainly will create them. 20 episodes to my most recent 20 episodes, I think I've made sweeping improvements to the narrative and how I present the story. And I hope that in my final 20 episodes, I'll be better still at this whole audiobook style of storytelling. It's definitely its own unique breed. I don't know if Daigo Knight reads his comments for suggestions or improvements or for any critical reason, but a lot of the time I find comments that point out narrative errors that I then try to avoid in future episodes. Just as much as I feel like I'm getting better on my own at this, I feel like you're all helping me to keep me honest and improve the rewrite itself. Oh, and I got distracted, but what about this whole Minato spying thing, or the Kiba fiasco at the end? This is the start of a self-contained arc that I think will just be super fun to lay out for all of you. Of course, Neji's perspective was on day 2 of the arc, so we're already missing information from day 1. But there's only 6 days total, so we'll cover them all well enough for the incredible conclusion that I've got planned. Oh, and Hinata has 2 eyes again. I recognize that these characters getting eyes again so quickly might trivialize their lost eyes. However, I need to point out that the importance in them losing their eyes was firstly, who took their eyes, and who out there in the world has them now. Secondly, it was meant as a growth period for them during the time skip. Again, I want to hammer home that Hinata has a full episode, just like this one, where we're going to have essentially a pitch black screen because she was blind for quite a long time. I also want to stress that Neji is still the antagonistic Neji that we've known so far. That's not gone away, and it's also important to his own character arc going forward. I know a lot of people expected a payoff during the Chunin exams that one of the Konoha 12 would put him in his place. But I have had a much longer plan set for him that's clearly expanded far beyond the Chunin exams. Enough's enough. You people need to tell me when to stop these episodes because I'm a rambler and I'll just go. Until next Friday, the sky's the limit.